Hello, book lover. This is Fernanda, your literature teacher at Books and Culture, and today I'm going to answer all your questions about me and my reading journey so far. So, a few days ago, I asked on Instagram, I opened a question box asking you if there were any questions you would like to ask me about my profession, my reading journey, my life as a literature teacher, and I got some very interesting questions, so I thought I'd record this video to answer them for you. And this is what we're going to do today. But before we do that, I would like to remind you that if you would like to go on a literary adventure with me, you can choose one of the online literature courses or workshops at Books and Culture on the website, booksandculture.club. There are some very interesting things for you to choose from. There is a course on Jane Austen, our beloved author. There is a course on reading short stories to get you familiarized with different authors, genres, and different time periods. There is also a course on understanding Frankenstein. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is one of my absolute favorite books. And there's so much more. Of course, there's also the Creative Reader Academy. So there are 3 different ways for you to join the Academy. You can know all about it on the website. So you can decide to be a classic, a scholar, or a book connoisseur, but all 3 give you access to the main course at Books and Culture, the Creative Reader Academy and Introduction to Literary Studies, in which you will learn all you need to know to read literature meaningfully and in context. And if you choose the middle or top tier, so the scholar or the book connoisseur, you also get access to 4 live literature workshops per year. And this is amazing. This is a more intimate setting, an online classroom. So we meet live to discuss one specific text through a specific lens. For instance, the calendar for 2024 is absolutely fantastic. In April, we started with Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes and detective fiction. It was great. In July, we'll read and discuss Edith Wharton's The Age of Innocence and talk about New York's Gilded Age. In October, we're going to talk about The Doppelganger and Robert Louis Stevenson's The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And in December, we're going to get ready for the holiday mood and we'll talk about J.R.R. Tolkien's Letters from Father Christmas. So if you join the Creative Reader Academy in the scholar or book connoisseur tier, you have access to these 4 workshops and all 4 workshops that happen every year at Books and Culture. At least that's how it's planned for now. I don't know how long it will keep it like this. But in any case, this is just to let you know there's a lot of fun stuff, literary fun stuff for you at booksandculture.club. So let's start with the questions. The first question is, how do you make time to read? Now, that's a very interesting question regarding the time that I am in my life or the moment that I am in my life. As some of you know, I had a baby 9 months ago, so my reading hours have decreased significantly, but I had to find a way to make time for reading because I really need to have a story going on in my head. I really need to be following a character to have this second life. So I had to find a way to include literature in my life. One thing that I still do and have done, well, this has been my habit for ages since I was a child. I always read before bed. I cannot really sleep without reading 1 or 2 pages at least. So I read, that's my ritual before bed, so before sleeping. So I read in bed a few pages, not much because I'm normally quite tired at the end of the day. But at least a little bit of the story I follow every day. And what I have started doing recently, and that's mainly because of Oliver, my son, I have started listening to audiobooks. I was not a big fan before, or I was skeptical about audiobooks. I really like the materiality of the physical book and, living through and really managing and smelling the book. But as I cannot do that very frequently at the moment, and when I have those moments, I really enjoy and treasure those moments with a book. But what I do now is whenever I go out for a walk with Oliver or when I'm going to work, I take the train, I listen to the audiobook. For instance, right now I'm reading Babel by R.F. Kuang, and I'm reading the physical copy, but I'm also following it on audiobook. So I continue the story where I left off in either format. So maybe that's something you could incorporate in your life as well in order to read more. Another question is, does your reading interests, like in topics or genres, change frequently? Yes, all the time. And there are different factors that affect my reading interests. I've always been passionate about 19th century literature. You can tell by what I offer on Books and Culture. But every now and then I get an impulse to read something different. So it could be that I have been influenced by a movie that I've seen, or an interesting book cover that I came across at a bookstore, or someone told me something about a book, or sometimes I just want to read something completely out of my comfort zone, and that's very important to do. So my interests change. You can follow my interests more or less with the literary cycles at Books and Culture. So we've done Jane Austen. We've recently finished Charlotte Bronte. We did Jane Eyre and The Professor. We also did Sherlock Holmes, and I was and still am very interested in detective fiction. So in order to prepare for the workshop, I studied a lot about detective fiction and added a lot of titles to my to-be-read list. The participants in the workshop also added a lot of titles to their to-be-read list. So that became another interest. And as a teacher, I love to study with my students. So if I feel like digging deeper into one specific literary genre that I'm not very familiar with at the moment, I also make it an occasion to do it with you guys at Books and Culture, so I can create a new workshop or offer a masterclass, so then we study together. So yes, my interests vary, and it's very important to have a wide range of interests as a reader, so then you challenge yourself as a reader, you read outside of your comfort zone, and you end up discovering treasures that you wouldn't have found if you had kept reading the same literary genre or the same author, for instance. Okay, another question. Tainara asks me, what are your favorite horror books? I'm not a very big horror fan. I don't like horror movies, for instance. I like reading mysteries or more of the terror, more psychological terror instead of the more gory physical horror. So I like Gothic stories, as you can tell. I like ghost stories, although some of them really make me scared. In that vein, although they're not necessarily horror books, I would say The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. That made me so scared, but I loved it. I loved the experience, and I'm definitely going to reread it. I've read it twice already. I also like the tales by Edgar Allan Poe. So The Fall of the House of Usher, for instance, also very creepy. So the combination of that supernatural element, I find it interesting. And I think the only horror book, I remember reading horror books when I was younger, when I had more nerve. But I read The Shining by Stephen King, and that was because I was part of a book club. Otherwise, I would not have chosen it myself. I enjoyed the experience. It was tough, I'm not gonna lie. There were moments that I had to stop reading. As I told you before, I normally read before sleeping, and I couldn't sleep. But I guess you can call it a horror book. So I'm glad I pushed myself out of my comfort zone and had that experience, but I don't think I would read that again, although I will probably read other books by Stephen King. I also read The Dead Zone, which was pretty interesting as well. Okay, now one of my students asks me, what was the book that inspired you to start teaching 18th century literature? So if you have been following me on Instagram, you will see that I have been sharing some of my slides and some of the books we've been discussing in this course that I teach at a university on 18th century literature. And to be honest, well, as you know, again, my area of expertise, if you can call it that, is 19th century literature. So early 19th century Jane Austen and the Victorian period, Charles Dickens, the Brontes, for instance. But while I was doing my PhD, I was asked to teach a course on 18th century literature, and I didn't know much about it. So I started studying to prepare all the material for my students, reading the novels, and I fell in love with it. And we started at from the restoration of monarchy, so from 1660, so the end of the 17th century, all the way to the end of the 18th, so the Gothic, and Romanticism, and the very beginning of the 20th century. I mean, the 19th century, the Regency period with Jane Austen, and it's fascinating. I've learned so much. And this year, 1 or 2 months ago, they needed someone to teach this course on 18th century literature in another university. So that's what I've been doing at the moment, and I'm just loving it. And this is an interesting question. What was the first book you read in English? As you know, English is not my first language. What book do you recommend to practice reading? So, well, I was born in 1990, so like many from my generation, I grew up with Harry Potter, and I would follow the books as they came out. Of course, I read the first one when it was first translated into Portuguese. I was around 10, 11 years old, and I fell in love with the universe. And then the movies came out, and it's such a fantastic, magical atmosphere. And I did read the first 3 books in Portuguese until The Prisoner of Azkaban. And then it all started, waiting anxiously for the publication of the book in its original language, in English. And it would take months for the Portuguese translation to be out. So I didn't want to wait. So with The Goblet of Fire, that's the book that I first read in English. And it was challenging at first. I don't know how old I was, 13, 14. But I couldn't wait. So that's what I did for Goblet of Fire, The Order of the Phoenix, The Half-Blood Prince, and The Deathly Hallows. And once Harry Potter opened the doors of English literature to me, I never left. So then I started reading other books, and my repertoire increased. And I went to university to study English language and literature pretty much because of my passion for Harry Potter. So there you go. What I would recommend to you, if you would like to start practicing reading in English, is to read a book you've read before in your native language. So I also reread the Harry Potter books, the first 3, in English after I had already read them in Portuguese. So you know the story, you know what's going on, so you can connect the dots more easily if you don't understand all of the words. You don't have to understand all of the words in the foreign language that you're reading. Otherwise, you keep breaking the reading experience, breaking the illusion you're in to check the dictionary or to check your phone. I did not have that at the time I was reading the dictionary. It becomes tiring. So don't do that. Keep reading unless it's something that's really bugging you, something that you feel you really have to know in order to understand what's going on. Then look it up. Otherwise, keep going. You might figure it out on your own. And then you become more and more familiarized with and more comfortable reading books in English. And then you can challenge yourself with books you have not read in your native language first. And finally, the last question is a very broad question, very interesting, and also very hard to answer. It's, what do you like to read? And I pretty much like to read everything. I have to be reading something, like I said before, and normally I read 2 or 3 books simultaneously. And then they have to be different so that I don't mix up the storylines. So, and normally I'm also reading a nonfiction book as well. So I really love 19th century English literature or contemporary stories that recreate a 19th century past, mainly set in England. I don't know, there's just something about it that I love. And I also love medievalist stories. So stories that recreate the medieval world, rather in a mythical light, not than factual Middle Ages. I really like, for instance, the Plantagenet series by Jean Plaidy. Although that is based on historical research, she did a great job. I don't know how many, I think 14 volumes. I've read the first 10, and they retell the history of England through their monarchs since Henry II, if I'm not mistaken, the first Plantagenet king, all the way to, who is it, the last one? Well, before Richard III. And of course, she breathes life into the characters, the real life characters. So she creates dialogues, and I love them. I also like stories that are set in a kind of mythical, fantasy, pseudo-medieval place, such as The Witcher, for instance. I really like that series. Game of Thrones. I like that. And I've been trying to read more contemporary fiction when I have the time, when I'm not reading for my work, for instance. I was part of a book club that unfortunately ended, and that's one of the reasons why I began with Books and Culture as well, as a way to start my own book club and to share it with all the world. For one book club, I don't want to call it assignment, but let's say meeting, we read Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara, and that book killed me. I would have never picked it myself. It was challenging, was way out of my comfort zone. It was sad, I cried, but I loved the experience because it really changed me as a reader. I've also been reading more Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Really like her books, and I'm completely fascinated about her TED Talk about the danger of a single story. So that's how I came to know her. So I read everything, and I try to challenge myself as a reader to read outside of my comfort zone, and also, of course, to read what pleases me, because reading should be fun as well. It should make it as an escape moment in your life. You know, you're going back home and you're going to have the time to curl under the blankets with a book. That's such a cozy moment. So of course you should do that as well. All right, so I hope I've answered your questions, and I hope you got to know me, your literature teacher, a little bit better. If you have any other questions, you can write them in the comment section below and I can answer them to you. Also, if you have any questions about the books as well, yes, the online courses and workshops at Books and Culture, put them in the comment section below and I will get back to you. So thank you for watching this video, and I will see you soon.